Alright, so basically I want to talk about the appeal of a lolly from a lolly perspective, because basically that's what I'm seen as a woman. I'm seen as a lolly. So I was curious about myself, and I was just doing research about myself. So I was like, who would be interested in a fucking lolly? So I did my research, and so basically the perfect person for a lolly is sexually attracted to their maturity and their seductiveness. But lollies are known for being innocent. They're very respectable women, so they're not really sex appeal women. They're basically women. They're very respectable women. They're not made for sex appeal. They're not made for sex, basically. So the the So when you see a lolly, you don't see them as sex appealing, you see them as respectable, but they do have this treasure of sex appeal, which is basically their maturity and their seductiveness. But that's their treasure, basically. Hold on, so yeah, basically that's their sex appeal is their treasure, basically. And the problem with predators is when they see a lolly, they want the treasure, but they don't respect the woman, so they end up corrupting the woman by forcing them to give up their treasure, basically. So the perfect lover, the perfect mate, or the perfect man for a lolly is basically a soft boy, basically a peasant boy, basically a bottom boy, not for the sake of being a slave or anything, but to be taken on this hero journey to become basically Prince Charming. That's basically the appeal of a lolly woman, is basically to take a boy and put him on a hero's journey and make him into Prince Charming. It's basically take him out of the slums into heaven, basically, into a kingdom, basically, into her kingdom, basically, her home. And then her treasure is given to him once she see him as mature and seductive as she is as herself, basically, or as he sees her as, basically seeing him as her superior, basically, almost. I know that's a strange word to say, but basically see her as superior. So you got to be superior to her if she's now seeing him as mature and seductive rather than him, because he already sees her as, well, I'm messing it up, but basically she got to see him as least superior a little bit. Because the things about lollies is they're innocent. They're not attracted to masculinity, basically. They're girly. They're girls. They're like little girls, basically. They like girl stuff. They're basically in the girls' world. So they're basically Barbie dolls. They're all about girl stuff. So to have a man that's very masculine and stuff around them doesn't really attract them, because it's like they have nothing to do with that. So that's why they need basically a soft boy. They need like a pretty boy. A soft boy is not a sissy boy, but a soft boy that could be made into a Prince Charming, basically. Basically a boy that needs to be basically taken on a journey, basically, to be made into something. Basically a boy that's not yet a man, but not yet a scumbag, So that's basically the appeal of a lolly, basically. At least like what attracts people to them emotionally, basically. It's just basically their maturity and their seductiveness. But they're not really made for sex appeal. They're made for respect. They're basically princess. They're not made for sex appeal. They're made to be basically princess. They're basically made to have like tea parties and princess syndrome. Basically, everything's like a tea party and all that bullshit. Everything's princess-like to them. So they're made to be very respected. That's why I personally don't have a problem with the image of lollies being used sexually, because that's just basically the treasure of them. But you can't do that with actual children, because children mature naturally. So to force them to mature is corrupting them. But I really don't personally have problems with images, really, because that's basically what we were represented by. We're represented by little girls. So when you see a lolly like adult, they're basically represented by a little girl, because they're very princess-like. They're basically a girls in a girl's world, basically. They're not made for man. They're not made for man's appeal. So you have to come into their world and be made a part of their world to be able to have their treasure, which is their maturity and their seductiveness. So basically, that's all I wanted to talk about. That's basically the appeal of a lolly, the appeal of a me, really. That's who I am, but that's from a lolly's perspective, bro. That's basically what they're made for. If you're like us, if you're like me, if you're like into that stuff, that's basically what you're attracted to, their maturity and their seductiveness. But you can't force, you gotta be respectable though. You gotta respect them. They're not made for sex appeal, they're made for respect, which is why I can see it's so controversial these images, to imagine these little girl bodies doing these terrible things. But that's basically the perfect representation of what a lolly is, even as an adult, because they're basically innocent. They're just innocence, really. They're nothing but innocence. So it's no better representation for them. Like the perfect adult looking lolly is Harley Quinn. So if you want to see a lolly that looks like an adult, just look at Harley Quinn. She's very princess-like, bro. She's basically a lolly in an adult's body. So if you want to see a acceptable lolly, represented lolly, or acceptable lolly, or an adult lolly, basically, it's basically Harley Quinn. She's the image of an adult lolly, basically like me. But I don't personally have a problem with the little body images, because it's just the perfect image. Sadly, there's no other image for it. Like, we got aesthetics, we got the lolita aesthetic, that's just clothes and stuff. But sex appeal, that's I don't know, because it's not what we're made for. So when you see these images of these little girls, that's literally the perfect representation of us, even though it's so controversial, because we're not made for that, bro. We're not made for sex appeal. So of course it's supposed to be disturbing and stuff like that, because we're not made for that. But we can easily give that to somebody who we have seen as worthy of our maturity and our seductiveness. See, it's basically our reward to someone we actually care about, to the man we actually care about, because we're not made for men. So we have to make a man made for us, basically. That's all I'm saying. So I appreciate y'all for listening. God bless y'all. This was the appeal of a lolly from a lolly's perspective. But yeah, thank you. I learned about myself, so yeah.